Hello everyone. Today we are covering a topic from IGCSE Cambridge Physics, lesson Motion, Forces and Energy, topic Physical Quantities and Measurements, subtopic Measurements. In this topic, we will refresh our memories on how to measure certain physical quantities. First of all, what are physical quantities? A physical quantity is a property of an object or a material that can be measured in numerical values. For example, length, time, temperature, anything that you can represent in numbers. First, we look at how to measure length. Now, the most common method is by using a ruler. I'm sure that's nothing new to you. The important thing to remember is you can only measure the length of a flat object using a ruler. You need to hold the ruler against the object, align the start of the edge of the object with the 0 centimeter marking of the ruler, and then at the other end of the object, we can read off the ruler to see how long the object is. What about volume? There are few methods to measure the volume. If it's a regular shaped solid, we can simply use its dimensions to calculate the volume with the volume formula for that particular shape. For example, if it was a cuboid, we can use a ruler to measure the length, height, and width of the cuboid. Then we can use the volume formula, which is height times length times width, to find the volume of the cuboid. If it was a liquid, then also it's quite simple. For this, we use a measuring cylinder. We can use the measuring cylinder to measure the volume of the liquid in milliliters or liters. It is a bit of a challenge though if the object is an irregular shaped solid. Now, when it's irregular shaped, you can't really use dimensions or you don't really know a volume formula to find the volume. And unlike a liquid, you can't just use a measuring cylinder. For this, we use something called the displacement method. How we carry this out is we take a measuring cylinder and fill it with some amount of water, usually about half of the measuring cylinder. And then we take this initial reading, like this image right here. We take the initial reading V1, volume 1. Then we take the irregular shaped solid, in this case it's a rock, and we gently place it in the same measuring cylinder and make sure there's no splashes when you do this. And when you do this, you will notice that the water level will go up. Why is that? Because the volume that was previously occupied by water is now taken over by this rock. Now, water has nowhere else to go because it had given way to the rock. So the water would go up. It will displace upwards. And the volume of water that displaced upwards is exactly equal to the volume of this rock. Because the water that was previously there where the rock is what has displaced upwards. So this second reading of volume we call V2. We have two volumes. What we do is we take the difference between V1 and V2. We call it delta V, the difference in the volume. This is exactly equal to the volume of the irregular shaped object that is inside the water. Whenever measurements are taken, regardless of whether it is length, mass, time, or even volume, it is always a good idea to take multiple readings and take an average of them to reduce any inaccuracies. Another instrument we can use to find small lengths or even small diameters is the micrometer screw gauge. How do we read from it? A micrometer screw gauge has two scales. The main scale, the one right here, and the thimble scale, the one right here. The thimble scale usually rotates around the main scale. Now, let's see how to read it. First, we need to read from the main scale. As you can see in this example, the main scale is divided into parts on the top of the line like this and also the bottom of the line like this. Now, according to this diagram, the thimble scale has passed two lines after 0 on the top of the line of the main scale. So if this is 0, this would be 1, this would be 2. And on the bottom, each one of these parts are divided into 2 again. So this little part would represent 0.5. And this one would be 1.5. This one would be 2.5. So how we read this main scale is, see the last visible line on the main scale. In this case, it is 2.5. 2.5 is the closest one to the thimble scale. Usually, the unit for the measurement is indicated on the micrometer screw gauge itself. In this case, it is a millimeter screw gauge. So the main scale reading would be 2.5 millimeters. Now let's look at the thimble scale. Reading the thimble scale is pretty simple. What you need to do is find the line on the thimble scale that perfectly coincides with this horizontal line on the main scale. So that would be this line right here. This is 35, this is 36, 37, and the line we want is 38. So our thimble scale reading would be 0.38 millimeters. And to find the reading that this shows, we just have to add them together. 2.5 plus 0.38 gives us 2.88 millimeters. Now, say you want to find the thickness of a sheet of paper. Of course, you can't ruler for this, right? So, to do this, we can take a bundle of 500 sheets of paper. And then we can use the micrometer screw gauge to measure the thickness of the entire paper bundle altogether. And once you get the reading, we just have to divide the reading by the number of sheets, which is 500, to get the thickness of one sheet of paper very accurately. Finally, let's look at time. The most commonly used instrument for this is the clock. Usually in experiments, we need to find the length of a time interval. To do this with a clock, we need to first measure the time at the start of the interval. For example, let's say it was 2:20 and 25 seconds. And then you need to measure the time at the end of the interval. Let's say it was 2:22 and 35 seconds. And to find the length of the time interval, all we have to do is find the difference between the two. Difference is always final minus initial. In this case, 2:22 p.m., 35 seconds minus 2:20, 25 seconds. 10, 2, 0. So the length of the time interval would be 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Using a stopwatch for this same thing would be much more straightforward. You just have to start the stopwatch at the beginning of the time interval, just click it, and then stop it at the end of the time interval, and it will directly read off the time taken for that particular time interval. Now that we have covered the theory for this topic, let's have a look at a few past paper questions. Now this question reads, what is the reading shown in the micrometer screw gauge? Like I said, usually in the micrometer screw gauge, they would say the unit. In this case, it is millimeters. Now first, we need to look at the main scale. The main scale has both 0, 1, 2 parts and also small part in the middle. So if you look at what the thimble scale has passed on the main scale, has passed up right up until this point. This point is 2.5. So your main scale reading would be 2.5 millimeters. Now let's move on to the thimble scale. What coincides with the main scale's horizontal line? This one right here. This is 31, 32, and 33. It's 33. This means the thimble scale reading should be 0.33 millimeters. Now, to find the correct reading, we just have to add these two together. When you add them, we get 2.83 millimeters. Let's check whether we have this answer. That's right. So answer number 2 is the correct answer for this question. 0.283 centimeters. Notice how the answers are in centimeters and not millimeters. So this millimeter value, we need to convert it into centimeters, which means we divide it by 10. So we get 0.283 centimeters. Let's look at one final question. The principal is concerned about the large number of vehicles passing along the busy road next to the school. She decides to make a measurement to find the number of vehicles per minute using the school clock. She notes the following readings. Okay, so at the beginning of the investigation, the clock looks like this. At the end, it looks like this. Question is, vehicles counted traveling left to right is 472. Vehicles counted traveling right to left is 228. Calculate the total number of vehicles passing the school per minute. So first, we have to find the time interval for this investigation. To do that, we need to read the time from the first clock and the second clock and find the difference. The first clock reads 2:05. The second clock reads 2:40. So to find the time interval, we need to take the difference between the two. 2:40 minus 2:05, you would get 35 minutes. So the duration of the investigation was 35 minutes. What is the total number of vehicles passed during this 35 minutes? Now, left to right and right to left has nothing to do with the question they are asking us. All of these vehicles have passed the school. So the total number of vehicles during these 35 minutes would be 472 plus 228, which will amount to 700 vehicles. Now, 700 vehicles have passed the school in 35 minutes. We want the number of vehicles per minute. To find that, we need to divide the number of vehicles by the total time taken. And when you find this, you would get 20 vehicles per minute. The answer is right here. Answer number 1, 20 vehicles per minute. With this, we have come to the end of the discussion of this topic. Thank you for listening.
Subscribe us now for more videos and content.